Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to look at importing assets into the Unreal Engine. Now, here I have two projects that look fairly similar. One I'm going to call my library, and one I'm going to call my target. Now, this one I've already imported some assets into, and rather than have you watch me download assets in real time, I'm going to skip around and show you some content after the fact. So, to start, how do we get an asset into the Unreal Engine library? Well, you have a few different methods. You can open up your content drawer, and you can either right-click and say Fab. You can click Fab over here, or you can go up to Windows and choose Fab, and this will all get you to the same window. Once you have these assets up in front of you, you can shop for assets, or if you've already added assets into your Fab account, you can click on the My Library tab, and then you can have the assets here. So for this example, I use the medieval castle. If you click plus, you can add that to your project. It'll have to download it to your local computer, and then it will add a version of that to your project. But the good news is if you're using these assets in multiple projects, you only need to download it locally once. Once I do that, it'll add it directly to the content folder. So the medieval castle comes with its own hierarchy of content that sits inside of the content folder. Sometimes, depending on where you get these from, they may have different structures, and so moving the assets around sometimes might be necessary in order to optimize the way you can find things inside of your project. Once you have it inside of your project, you can click and drag anything inside of the folders into the space that you're going to be editing. So if I pull this up and I wanted to grab a tree stump, then I can just click and drag, and I now have that tree stump to work with. So working with Fab, assets are pretty easy to pull in. If you aren't working with Fab, you want to import your own assets, the Import tab will allow you to go navigate to different file folders on your computer. You might want to check out the FBX content pipeline documentation inside of the Unreal documentation, specifically the static mesh pipeline if you're looking at building out the world, and you want to make sure you're building things that are compliant to the expectations for triangulation, mesh detail, and collision. Coming back to the project, this project has only one asset kit added to it, and if I go into the maps for this, most packages are going to come with a overview map where they have all the assets laid out, and then they're going to have an example that demonstrates the things in context. So basically, what they feel that their assets are capable of producing when they generate well-crafted world building. If I look at the medieval castle in context to the file size that we have here, I'll show you in just a second, you'll see that it has a lot of asset reuse. Once we open up here, in 1 second, it's still loading in. There we go. All right, so you can see this space, and we'll go ahead and make this a little bit more immersive. Oh, texture sources are being built. As we look inside, you can see that there's a number of materials and textures inside of the space that are repurposed in a lot of different ways. They have the same structure repeated multiple times, which is a good level design practice. You don't want to have everything be single use only, right? So as you go through, if I were to look at this asset and find all versions of the flag, or whatnot, the flag has its own textures, its own materials, its own details. So when we think about the idea of this level, we need to consider that each one of these assets has a mesh, a material, a collision, and then the level itself has details about lighting and construction and all that. So these take up a lot of space, and we want to look specifically at the space that we're generating here. I have a few comparisons that I want to draw up here for the file sizes. Here I have the library. When I add just the one medieval package, it's up to 9.7 gigs. The default library target that I have is an empty project. It's just over 2 gigs. So a default Unreal project being just about 2 gigs means that we should see, on average, packages that have this level of detail are going to quintuple the total file size that we're looking at. Now, the packages that I have over here, these are the built version of the projects. So if I build out an empty project, it comes down to just under 1 gig. If I build out this medieval project using this map, it builds out to 4.3 gigs. So you would see that you don't generally want to dump the entire asset pack into your project if you're not going to be using all the assets. Going from 1 gig to 4.5 gigs is a pretty big jump, especially if you're only coming in here to get, say, I don't know, the flags or a particular tower or something like that. So this tower is the castle tower, a specific static mesh. I have a few assets that maybe I want to grab. I want to get the tower, a flag, and a statue, right? So I can grab these specific assets, and I can browse to find these things in my content viewer, and you'll see it'll show one here, but then I have another one down here and that one there. So there are multiples selected. What I can do with this is if I want to get just these 3 assets into my other project, I can right click on these and then I can do a asset action, and we'll say migrate asset. So there's a difference between exporting and migrating. When I export an asset, that means I'm going to send the file out of the Unreal environment to be edited in another software. So if I'm exporting a texture, that it's going to turn it into a particular format for image editing. If I send it out as a model, it'll send it out as an FBX, so we can modify the geometry of it. Animations have their own data. So as I export an asset, it goes to an external process. It's the reverse of import. But if I migrate an asset, that's going to take a U asset in the way that Unreal understands the asset, and it's going to move it to a new location. When I click that button, it's going to look at all of the dependencies to be able to create that asset. So where are the folders that these things exist in? What are the assets? This is a material here, and this is a collection of material functions, material instances, right? And so we have the textures that support the different materials that we were representing here. And if we click OK, it's going to ask us what's the target folder that we want. So instead of going from my library, we're going to go to my migration target. All we have to do is select the content folder for that. And when I say select folder, it'll migrate that over. And then you can see very quickly here, this project now has a medieval castle, and instead of having all of the assets involved, I now have the tower and these two props. So I've been able to bring over exactly and only what I wanted, and now my file size isn't going to be 4 gigs larger. It will be larger, but only by the necessary amount. So as you're working with the projects, you can move individual assets like this, or what you can do is take your collection over here. We have this level we're going to navigate through. If we wanted to go to the overview level, we could do that, but sometimes it's nice to find the things in context. So I say maybe this archway is something I'm going to want to use. What I can do is I can create a collection, create a local collection, and we'll just call this medieval set. And then I can take this asset. When I go to browse to it, I can do Control B, that'll browse to the asset, and then I can just drop that in here, and now I have this set. So if I have this set collection, what I can do after, let's add a few other elements into the set. Control B, and then I'll click and drag these over here. So now I have 4 things inside of my set. If I go to create a new level, I'm going to not save the changes I've made there. I have this empty set, so what I can do is view my collection, and I can grab all of these assets and drop them into the collection. And then if I want, I can take, obviously, I want to be a little bit more careful about how I select assets. But as I go through and use these, I want to consider that the whole level, if I come up to my content folder, can be migrated over. So if I go to Asset Actions and then choose Migrate, it's going to say all the things inside a new world would be sent over. So let's save that real quick here. So it can register all the assets that are in there. So when I say migrate, it'll register all the things that are inside of that project, including references to blueprints and things like that. If you're working with C++, some things are not going to migrate as easily, but you want to just be mindful of what is and is not coming over. So you want to go through your list and verify all the things you expect are going to be there. And when you click OK, it'll let you choose a target. So I can choose this target. My migration target's still here. Choose the content folder. I don't want to override the ones I've already imported. And then when I get over to this project, I can go to my content folder and load my assets, switch to unlit mode, and I have all the assets that I want there in the way that I want them. So you can bring over the items individually, or you can kind of dump them into a collection and writ large pull them over into a level and bring that over. So you have a few different options for how you should do this. If you find that your project had a bunch of stuff dumped into it and you don't necessarily want to bring all that with you when you go to package the project, consider migrating your content to a new project when you're ready to ship your game out. Assuming you don't have a lot of code tied up into it, it's a pretty easy way to do it. Just make sure that you also update your project settings and any other configurations that you have that were not directly tied to a level or an asset. I hope this gets you an idea of how to get content in and out of Unreal and move it between projects, providing a little bit of optimization. I hope this empowers you to go out there and keep building.